tell us a little bit about what's your take on all this as well, and the Treasury market itself, and what it is actually indicating, Qian.
Right. I think when you look at the U.S. Fed policy, we think, when they look at the domestic economy, has been pretty well, and we think that inflation is very likely to overshoot the 2% target by the end of this year. So, Fed is just on the way to have their 2 hikes for the rest of 2018. So given that, I would say, yes, it will probably put some upward pressure on both the U.S. Treasury yield and also the U.S. dollar. But on the other hand, I would say, especially on the long end of the Treasury yield, despite the short-term volatilities, a lot of the, long-term yield is actually determined by structural factors, such as the long-term productivity, long-term inflation expectation, which is still very well anchored. So in that sense, we would say, we expect the, 10-year U.S. Treasury yield to remain in a range, between 2.75% to 3.25%, within that range.
This is a function, though, surely, of what's been happening with quantitative easing. We've also got certain things being muddled up with quantitative tightening as well here. So does the yield curve tell us what it used to do, or is it actually skewed?
Well, I think it's very dangerous to argue that this time is different, right? So I do see that the yield curve, we have seen it flattening quite significantly. Now, in the past, ever since in the last 70 years, we've seen that yield curve, flattening could eventually lead to inversion, and that could be a good leading indicator for our economic downturn or recession. So I think that is something the Fed will watch closely in 2019, especially when the monetary policy will start to become restrictive in early 2019. So that's something we need to watch for.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm suggesting here, we've just got a yuan reference rate being set. I'm just going to turn our attention to what's going on with China. This is it. The reference rate has been set at 6.83, so significantly weaker than yesterday's 6.79 fix. I'm going to bring up a chart from our GTV library here, and what it is just showing how also looser policy, as well as the strength of the greenback, is actually playing into weakness for the RMB here. So there we go, approaching, this is the offshore, this is just approaching 6.9 virtually. Now tell me, what is your take on what's going on?
Well, I would not be surprised. I mean, the fundamental is arguing for the yuan weakness, right? You have the U.S. is hiking, China is actually providing monetary stimulus, and at the same time, you do see China's current account surplus shrinking. So I would say there is definitely fundamental support for that currency depreciation. But on the other hand, I would say, for the policymaker at this point, they are happy to let the market determine the direction for the currency, and they would happy to see more volatility. But on the other hand, they would also be very careful because, too fast the currency depreciation would trigger capital flight. So in that sense, I would say they are carefully watching that, and they will be ready to come back into the market and to intervene if they feel that the currency depreciation is too much and too fast.